Late one summer's night, three men left Limerick City in a taxi and crossed the county border into Clare, but only two came back alive. Hello and welcome to The Cliff's Edge. Today's episode is the unsolved murder of Henry Hurley. In July of 1989, a well-liked and well-known Limerick taximan picked up two passengers late at night. Just over 12 hours later, Henry Hurley's body was found. He'd been badly beaten and robbed. The perpetrators were quickly identified, and one was even arrested and charged. Yet 3.5 decades on, this cowardly murder remains unsolved. This video is brought to you by the Cliff's Edge podcast. So if you want to hear more about unsolved cases like this, just search your podcast platform for the Cliff's Edge podcast. How's it going and welcome. I'm your host, Kieran McConnell. I know I say this about a fair few cases, but this case really is massively underreported, and it is fair to say that there is a lot more information about this case somewhere out there. I just haven't been able to find it. So what is available is limited and a bit all over the place. You'll notice that as I go through the episode. So just before I begin, if anyone has any info or knows anyone that has any info on this case, and if it was previously public knowledge, please share it with me if you want, or even if you could point me somewhere that I could find more info, because I'd really like to come back to this case and do an interview on it. So let's begin what we do know. Henry Hurley lived on Somerville Avenue in Limerick City. By all accounts, Henry was a well-liked fella, fairly well known in parts of Limerick, and he was said to be always very well dressed. His family were also well known in the city because of a company they owned called Clunes Tobacco. I couldn't really find much else on Henry's personal life, but I'm guessing from the reports that he wasn't married and didn't have kids. Ultimately though, I can't actually confirm that. Another thing is that Henry was born on the 22nd of May 1957, which made him 32 when he was murdered in an appalling and cowardly crime. Which brings us to Thursday, the 6th of July 1989. Henry had been working as a taximan for about 6 years. He would have started somewhere around 1983 when he was about 26, and he was known to have had the cleanest taxi in Limerick. So on that Thursday, Henry went out into Limerick City and began working his white 1989 Nissan Sunny taxi. This was said to be a busy night because the Limerick Summer Festival was taking place. Now, I couldn't find out what time Henry began work that Thursday, but he was out late because sometime before 3 a.m. that night, he picked up two male passengers. One of them sat in the front, the other in the back. Again, where he picked up the fare, I don't know. But he did drive through Limerick City with these two, because his taxi was seen driving past the Franciscan Church on Henry Street just before 3 a.m. From there, the taxi headed out along the Ennis Road and about 5 minutes later crossed the county border into Clare. Now, even though they'd only driven a few minutes outside Limerick City, they would have already been out in the wilderness. So roughly 15 minutes into the drive, the taxi reached a place known as Set Right's Cross. From what I can see, this was basically a pub/petrol station called Set Right's that was located at a crossroads. One heading in the direction of Ennis and the other road headed in the direction of the small village of Cratloe. Today, the place looks a bit different because of the N18 road, but in 1989, it was just a country pub located at a crossroads on the outskirts of a village. The significance of this place is that Henry's taxi stopped there at some time after 3 a.m. At the crossroads, he spoke to another taximan and told him that his two passengers were looking for a party somewhere in the area. The two passengers were described as having English accents, and the front seat passenger was described as mid-20s, slim with black hair. Henry's white Nissan Sunny then headed in the direction of the small village of Cratloe, and a few minutes later was spotted again, driving towards Cratloe Wood by a second witness, who provided a description of the backseat passenger, mid-40s, slim with black hair. There were no further reports concerning Henry's taxi that night/morning. Later that day, the 7th of July, at around 4:40 p.m, more than 12 hours after Henry's taxi was seen heading towards Cratloe Wood, Henry Hurley's body was found in overgrowth on Woodcock Hill, near what is known locally as the Golf Ball, a radar station for Shannon Airport. It would have been roughly a 10-minute drive northeast of where the taxi was last spotted. Henry had been strangled, badly beaten and robbed. His white Nissan Sunny was found not far from his body, and an attempt had been made by his killer or killers to steal the taxi, but they reversed it into a bog and had to leave it there. Now, how Henry was discovered is not actually clear. I have read at least one report that said a local man was out walking and spotted the out-of-place taxi, and Henry's body was found a short distance away. As for the two that were last seen in the taxi, after the taxi was bogged, they walked back to the Ennis Road and hitched a lift into Limerick City, and according to Superintendent Jim Drudy, they got dropped off at the Telecom Éireann building in Limerick. He then went on to say that these two men may or may not be the two men that entered a taxi on Patrick Street and took this taxi to the Raheen area of Limerick, arriving there at 6 a.m. What came of that line of inquiry, I honestly don't know. But I did find another report that said these two went to a guest house in Galway and tried to get staff to change their date of arrival to the 6th of July, the day before Henry Hurley was murdered. There's no way to sugarcoat it, and I won't. These two are just pure filth and are as stupid as it comes, although it's probably this brazen stupidity that allowed them to avoid being captured initially. As we say in Ireland though, they were known to Gardaí. This was because in April of 1989, some months before the murder, they had travelled to the southwest of Ireland from the Twerton area of Bath in England. They quickly came to attention because they would eat at restaurants in the area and then leave without paying. They were involved in other petty crime too. They also stayed at numerous guest houses and homeless shelters throughout Cork, Galway and Waterford. So it didn't take the guards long to identify these two. But I get the impression they slithered back to England before being identified, or at least before they could be arrested, because based on the reports I've read, the guards had to work with Interpol on this case. Now, 2 months after the murder, on the 5th of September 89, a letter was handed to a priest at a hospital in Galway, and according to Superintendent Drudy, the letter contained information about the murder. Now, I don't know if this letter helped progress the investigation, but 11 months after the murder, Gardaí arrested 25-year-old Paul John McLaughlin, then of Northview Close, Twerton, Bath, England. McLaughlin was described as unemployed at the time, although personally I'd alter that to unemployable. The day after his arrest, on the 2nd of June 1990, McLaughlin went before Ennis District Court and was accused of receiving, harbouring, assisting and comforting 45-year-old Matthew Edwards, knowing that Edwards had murdered Henry Hurley. Edwards was also said to be from the Twerton area of Bath. Why Edwards was not arrested at the same time as McLaughlin, I have no idea. He was said to be wanted by British police for fraud involving checks at the time, so he could have been on the run by 1990. So back to this Paul John McLaughlin, once of Northview Close, Twerton, Bath. He was denied bail by Justice Albert O'Dea and remanded in custody. 9 months later, in March of 1991, McLaughlin was brought before the Central Criminal Court in Dublin. Prosecutor Paul Carney alleged that on the early morning of the 7th of July 89, Edwards and McLaughlin entered Henry Hurley's taxi, and at some point Edwards demanded money from Henry Hurley and hit him. Edwards then removed the radio from the taxi and strangled Henry Hurley with a tie that he had in his pocket. After the murder, it was alleged that Edwards and McLaughlin went to a guest house in Galway, tried to pay using welfare vouchers, and asked for their date of arrival to be changed to the day before the murder. All of that was reported on the 8th of March, but 3 days later, the DPP entered what is called a nulle prosequi, which translates as unwilling to prosecute. The reason for this was because of an issue with the chain of evidence, and it related specifically to the arrest of McLaughlin on the 1st of June 1990, which was said to be unlawful. The exact details of this don't seem to have been reported on. It is important to say, though, that a nulle prosequi is in no way an acquittal, and further charges can still be filed against the accused at a later date. But McLaughlin was freed, and it doesn't appear that he has been charged since. As for Matthew Edwards, I can't find anything on him. He's only referred to in the reports on McLaughlin. There was one report in the Irish Independent on the 14th of March 91 with the headline, Taximan Murder Review Pledge. In the report, a Garda source is quoted as saying that there will be a full review of every aspect of the murder and a new file will be prepared for the DPP, and it is for the DPP to decide on an extradition. But the source did point out that Edwards could not be brought to Ireland just to be interrogated and could only be extradited once an arrest warrant had been issued. But it doesn't seem that Edwards has been arrested or charged, but I can't confirm that for certain. That 1991 report from The Independent is the last trace of Edwards I could find. So maybe he was arrested at some point and charged, and I just couldn't find it. But he was certainly never found guilty, because the case is still officially unsolved, and by 2010 it was being reviewed by the Serious Crime Review Team and Gardaí at Ennis Garda Station. Around this time, the Gardaí also made some public appeals for information and handed out leaflets in the Sarsfield Road area of Limerick. Superintendent John Scanlon also made the following statement in 2010. Maybe someone saw these two men being picked up in Limerick City by Henry on that night, or maybe these two were not from the area and were staying in the Cartlow/6 Mile Bridge area at the time. I'm appealing to anybody who might have information that would help us with our inquiry to come forward to Crime Stoppers now. Based on that statement, it would be shocking to think that someone is withholding information that could solve this case, but who knows? The guards have appealed to taxi drivers in the area that night to come forward, and they are also appealing for info about a white Volvo car seen in the Setrights Cross area around the time of the murder. And that is about all the info I could find. There was just one more article, and I'll come to that just before we finish. Now, as to Paul McLaughlin, that's McLaughlin with an O instead of the A. I have no idea what happened in terms of the investigation, but I'm fairly sure he is still alive and living in the Twerton area of Bath. We know he was 25 in 1990, making him in and around 60 today. At his brief trial at the Central Criminal Court, it was said that McLaughlin told Edwards that he wanted no part of the murder, but Edwards told him that you are part of it now. That's handy for McLaughlin, considering the fact that there is no one else out there apart from Edwards that can verify that conversation. Like McLaughlin, Edwards' character is not exactly decent. As to Matthew Edwards, there is even less on him. Like McLaughlin, he is from Twerton in Bath. He was 45 in 1990, making him roughly 80 as of today. The first question there then would have to be, is he still alive? If so, is he still being pursued by Irish authorities? And will he ever face justice? If these two or anyone else managed to avoid prosecution for this cowardly murder, in my view, it would be one of the greatest injustices in the history of the Irish state. The likes of Edwards and McLaughlin should be pursued to the ends of the earth if necessary. And I'm not saying that hasn't happened. Again, there just isn't enough information available to say either way. For Henry Hurley's family, it's just such a terrible thing for one of their family members to be killed for no reason at all. And then for there to be no justice, it's just unimaginable. My heart absolutely goes out to them. The most recent report I could find on the case was published in 2012 by the Limerick Post. It was quite an interesting article because it was about a letter someone had written to the newspaper. The letter was from a man named Sean Patrick Shinners. He was a chef in Limerick at the time of the murder, but has since moved to America. In the letter, he asked for the Gardaí to be contacted. And fair play to the Limerick Post because they contacted the guards and got the following response. The crime has not been solved and the investigation will remain open. And that would be the last official statement I can find in relation to the case. Sean Patrick Shinners also wrote in his letter, Mr. Hurley's family and the people of Limerick are entitled to some closure on this matter, or is it destined to become another Colleen ban for our grandchildren to hear about? You can't argue with that, and fair play to him for sending the letter. Colleen Ban refers to the unsolved murder of a 15-year-old girl in Clare back in the 1800s. And at least the letter proves that people still want this cowardly murder solved and that it will not be forgotten. And really, how could anyone that knows about this case forget about it? I'm not going to sit here and speak like I knew Henry Hurley or make it sound like I have a personal connection to him and my feelings are irrelevant. But when preparing this episode, this case absolutely infuriated me. So God knows how awful this is for his poor family. Again, for what matters, my heart just goes out to them. Barring crimes against children and the elderly, this is possibly the most cowardly murder I think I've ever seen. And to see at least one of these people that were allegedly involved in Henry's murder out there today living what appears to be a happy life on social media, it's just vile. And to be honest, I don't know how anyone can be withholding information that may lead to a conviction in this case, or how they can even live with themselves. So Henry was 32 years of age at the time of the murder. He had black hair, and you can see from the picture that is available of him that he is well groomed and well presented, and looks like he was in decent enough shape. He lived on Somerville Avenue just off the South Circular Road in Limerick City. Henry drove a 1989 white Nissan Sunny taxi and was popular and well known throughout Limerick. Henry Hurley was a decent bloke who went out to work one day and met with two of the worst kind of people imaginable. People that have now avoided justice for over 36 years. As I said at the start, I'd like to come back to this again because clearly there's more to be told. So again, if anyone would like to share with me any information that was publicly available at some stage, please get in contact. I'll put the contact details in the notes. Also, you can see there in the channel, there's a video with a few news reports about Henry's case, and they're very well put together. There's a brief reconstruction of Henry's last movements. They give a good insight into Ireland back in '89. There's interviews with Gardaí and also footage of McLaughlin being hauled into Ennis District Court. And if you like this episode, we have a load more podcast episodes covering unsolved cases from throughout the world. We also have interviews with a wide range of guests. Just search your podcast platform for the Cliff's Edge podcast. So if anyone has any information that can help solve this case, they can contact Crime Stoppers, who have put up 10 grand in reward money anonymously on 1800 25 0025, or the Garda Confidential line on 1800 666 111. And I'm sure Ennis Garda Station will be happy to receive any information, and they can be contacted on 065 684 8100. This video is dedicated to Henry Hurley.